President Trump and Joe Biden are tailoring a message specifically targeted at Hispanic voters. That competition was on full display Sunday when the president spoke at a Latinos for Trump event in Las Vegas. Joe Biden is planning to campaign in Florida Tuesday, telling reporters he will, quote, work like the devil to win over Latino voters. The Latino community, like other voting blocs, is not monolithic, but the Washington Post reports Latino groups and some Democrats are worried Biden is falling behind when it comes to outreach and speaking on key issues. Biden campaign senior advisor Simone Sanders addressed these concerns over the weekend.
We know that we have work to do, and we have said from the beginning, and Vice President Biden has been very clear about this, as has Senator Harris, that we are really working to earn every single vote in this country, and we want to earn the votes of the Latino and Hispanic community.
Chuck Rocha joins me now. Chuck is a former senior advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders' 2016 and 2020 presidential campaigns. Welcome to you, Chuck. Thanks very much for being with us. So you headed up Senator Sanders' outreach to the Latinx community. Do you see a disconnect between the Biden campaign and Latinx communities now?
No, I don't see a lack of a connection. I just see a lack of money being spent to make that connection. He makes a connection really strongly with the Latino community. And when you tell a Latino the message that Joe Biden has, he does very well. The fact of the matter is there's just not as much money going to take that message to Latinos as there needs to be. Joe Biden himself has now spent as much money as Donald Trump talking to Latinos, but that alone, as you can see from your numbers, is not enough. I'm currently tracking over $500 million being spent to talk to white voters from outside organizations and super PACs on behalf of Joe Biden, while the three leading super PACs, one of which I will say I run, has only received $5 million worth of funding. That's a $500 million to $5 million gap. And when you have that big a gap going to trying to educate Latinos compared to white voters, that's why you see the drop off in these numbers, I really think.
So you know as well, Chuck, that Senator Sanders won the Nevada caucuses by a landslide in large part due to young and Latinx voter turnout in his favor. What do you think that Joe Biden can learn from that?
Is to go to where they are, show up in these spaces and have a conversation. And during a time with COVID where you can't literally show up at their college, you can't go to their house and knock on their doors. That means, to my original point, that you need to spend even more money delivering a digital ad to their phone, a digital ad to their streaming service. They're not watching TV. They're watching Hulu and YouTube. You need to be texting them. You need to deliver ads where these young Latinos are. What happens with young Latinos most of the time is that they're not a prime voter because they're a new voter. So most campaigns don't go talk to a new or infrequent or a newly registered voter. With the Bernie campaign in the Nevada caucuses, we made a very intentional operation to have a conversation with these younger voters. There's one way to guarantee that you'll never get a young voter's vote is if you don't ask them. Asking them is the thing you need to do in the beginning.
Chuck, let's turn to the pandemic. It has hit the Latinx and Black communities especially hard, both from a health and economic standpoint. What have you heard, Chuck, from Latino voters about this particular issue and what they'd like to see as policy prescriptions to help them get through this time?
Oh, my God, this is a great question, and this is no better time to ask this question than right now. In focus groups that I've been participating with all summer long, as COVID was creeping up and becoming more and more devastating in our community, there's this undertow of anxiety that Latinos describe in real time. More Latinos are laid off. More Latinos are also essential workers. Latinos are more likely to die under COVID. Our children, horrifically, are 8 times more likely to catch COVID than a white child. So what that means to a mother and a father and a grandmother is this anxiety of live, die, feed my family. What happens to my insurance when I lose my job? Do I go to that job? And in the midst of all of this turmoil and all this historical anxiety, we, political consultants like me, still expect for them to be tuned in, know everything about every issue, show up and vote, get everybody in their family to show up and vote when they're literally trying to figure out how to feed their family and stop from dying from a disease.
Right. So, I mean, is the answer they're not looking necessarily for specifics, but they want to hear COVID-19 and the pandemic talked about as a priority?
Yes, and I should have said that and led with that. Like, that's the number one issue. When I said I've been hearing about it in the focus groups, they care about that the most, and they want Joe Biden to tell them what he's going to do to make their lives better. In these focus groups, when we would say, did you realize that Vice President Biden helped us get out of this catastrophe with President Obama when we came out of that horrible recession we were in? They were like, that's great. That gives him qualifications to get us out of this mess. But they didn't realize that, so we had to have that conversation. It goes back to my original point. If you'll spend the money to say, hey, I'm Vice President Biden, I got us out of that mess. I'll help us get out of this mess, because you can't trust Donald Trump and his opinion, blah, 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 blah. It just goes right on to say exactly what you want to that voter.
Really interesting to hear about that. Chuck Rocha. Chuck, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.